When I was asked to do this, it was just to cover some of the issues. Up here, I took a drive around, maybe 2 or 3 different days, couldn't find many issues, which is a good thing. But we're going to cover 5 things that I saw: pine beetle, hips, beetle, dwarf mistletoe, pine needle scale, and fire mitigation. Mountain pine beetle. First day I drove up, first road I drove up, I found a tree. For the most part, it's not what it was a few years ago, and you all know that, but it's still out there. I personally don't think it's worth spraying for. I think it's a sanitation thing. I talked to the lady who owned this piece of property. She claimed she was new in the area. She was unpacking. There was service guys there. They had planned to take it out. I haven't driven by again, but hopefully they did. So it is up here. Just a fast review. That's Mountain Pine Beetle, about the size of a grain of rice. Personally, I'd go with a little bigger. 1-year life cycle, flight time, mid-July through September. The flight in July, or mid-July, is usually lodgepole. Ponderosa is closer to the 1st of August. So right now is what those guys are doing. They're flying. They're flying from the tree that they infested and killed to finding a new home. Once the beetle finds a tree, the attack, the tree will put out pitch, hopefully to reject the beetle. You need a lot of beetles to kill a tree. The beetle will go in, pitch will come out, the beetle will swim back up, pitch will come out. Either it's going to win or it's going to lose. If the beetle loses, there will be a large white pitch mass. A lot of times the dead beetle will be in it, and a lot of times you'll see pitch running down the tree. It will look like candle wax rolling down the tree. If, in fact, the beetle wins, those are all small little pitch tubes, bad sign. That's on a lodgepole. They're pretty more pronounced on ponderosa. And you also see frass around the base. Frass is boring dust and beetle stuff. When we see that, we're pretty sure it's in there, but we look underneath the bark to find the blue stain, to find the galleries. I personally found, with the beetles flying this time of year, I would really not start doing inspections until October. That's when I start to see the larvae moving away. It's more defined, and I've made a few people cut down a few trees. I can't make anybody cut down a tree that I can't find the larvae or the beetle. So we waited till October. It works better. Once they get into the tree, there's a gallery. The beetles go straight into the tree, male and female. After they breed, male's pretty much done with. Female builds the gallery. She lays eggs as she goes. Really, really, really tiny eggs. Kind of hard to see unless you know what you're looking for. About 2 weeks afterwards, the eggs hatch. The larvae start to feed perpendicular. And also, you notice the blue stain. Does the blue stain kill the tree, or does the beetle kill the tree? You know, actually the latest research sort of said it was the beetle. All the gallery and all the feeding essentially girdles the tree. The blue stain actually is a food source for the larvae, but I think it's probably a little bit of both. It probably clogs conductive tissues also. Physiologically, the tree also is dead within 2-3 weeks after a successful attack. It stays green, it has reserves, but essentially the tree's dead. During the epidemic, you would see that. You actually need 200-300 beetles successfully hitting the tree to kill it. When we had the epidemic going on, and there were so many beetles out there, you know, the first beetles go out, pretty much the scout beetles, they find susceptible trees. They send a pheromone out. It says, come to this tree. All the beetles come until it's filled. Then there's another pheromone that they put out, and it says, this tree's full, go somewhere else. They're smart little critters, but they do that. If you've ever listened to Dave Leatherman, he claims they chirp. That's what goes on. If you notice, a lot of frass. That will be important when we talk about the Ipps beetle. They're not good housekeepers. And those are better pictures of the larvae, pretty much white little 1/4-inch grubs with a brown head. This time of year, when they're leaving the tree, those are the exit holes. Once the exit holes are there, there's nothing you can do about it. The beetles are gone, that's a standing dead tree. The exit holes are about a 1/4 inch diameter. You know, we got the pitch tube, the gallery went there, straight up the tree, maybe 10 inches. Exit holes will be out to the sides because that's the way the larvae went. A lot of times, maybe next month, a tree that was attacked, you'll find what looks like an exit hole up here, and you think, beetles have already left. They put a vent hole in, and it's for survival, exchange gases, so they'll do that. Exit holes are perpendicular to the gallery. Treatment, we don't want to, even when it was really bad, I know people who were spraying 1,000, 1,500 trees on their property. It was nuts. They bought their own sprayers. That's what they did all summer, was spray trees. But right now, with so few trees, you know, if there's really that special tree out there that you really think you have to save, and there's still some beetles around, go ahead and do it. Right now, the things we want to concentrate on are the healthy forest, and that's pretty much when we're going to talk about fire mitigation also. If we thin our forest down to a basal area of about 70, good rule of thumb, if you can figure out the average diameter on your property or in a section of your property and add 7. So if the average diameter is 10, add 7, the tree should be 17 feet apart. That's pretty far. We don't want in a ponderosa pine forest, we don't want to look like a plantation. A ponderosa pine forest is a mosaic forest. There'll be some trees spaced like that, there'll be a clump of trees together, but then there'll be a meadow. That's the way a ponderosa pine forest should be growing. But we do want to get to about a 70 basal area. A healthy forest is really the best way to protect a forest in the future. Because a healthy forest, the trees have more water, there are more nutrients, the tree is healthier, so they can defend themselves, they can put out more pitch to throw the beetle out. That was study done by a guy named John Schmidt during when we had a beetle epidemic at that time. Probably we're not going to see one for another 10, 15, maybe 20 years if we're lucky. A healthy forest is what we've got to shoot for. With so few trees, sanitation. Sanitation is pretty much, you find that beetle tree, get rid of it. Just get rid of it. If you find it in the fall, and again, if you're confused or need help, call me in October, and we'll come up and take a look on any particular property. And if we find beetle, you have until next August to take care of it, because they don't flag until next August. You have plenty of time to deal with it. The sooner you get it down, the better. Get the slash to the slash pile. Great thing they do for you out here. Get that log out in the sun. Let it bake. Actually, it will get, especially this year, it would have got hot enough underneath the bark to kill the majority of the beetles. Maybe not all of them. You may have to roll that log, especially come next May, you'll start rolling it a third after 3 weeks. But get it out in the meadow if you have a meadow, and you should have a meadow because you have a healthy forest. So sanitation, right now, that's the best thing to do. Need the heat. It has to get about 110 to 120 underneath the bark. And so you need that solar intensity. Beetles, when the beetles hit the tree, there are 3 bugs in general. The red turpentine beetle, it's another bark beetle. I haven't really seen turpentine beetles kill trees up here in the forest, but they're just there. It's bigger than the pine beetle. It is sort of a turpentine, reddish turpentine color. It's sort of good looking. Then we have pine beetle hitting from, in that lodgepole, it hit all the way to the ground, but usually about from here up to about 30 feet. So that's why when trees are sprayed, that sprayer has to go up to 30 feet or a top diameter of about 4 inches. Then above that is the Ips. Right now, Ips is doing a little weird thing just because there were so many of them, because of pine beetle, because of all the wood that was cut. But I think that's going to right itself. Those are the sprays. I think if you've been up here long enough, you've probably seen those before. Carbaryl is 7. Permethrin is Astro, or what people were buying that they could apply themselves was something called 10 guard. And bifenthrin, I don't know if anybody uses it, even commercial guys. They all pretty much have, Carbaryl may be that much more damaging to the environment, but it's that much. U.S. Forest Service, Rocky Mountain National Park, when they did their spraying, they used carbaryl. Those are there, they work, they don't kill beetles, they just spray the tree before the beetles fly to them and go, and we're gonna go somewhere else. So if you spray all your trees on your property, they're going to your neighbor's house. But, and we always said, spray your top 10, 15 trees and, wish for the best, because we don't want to spray everything. Or there are the pheromone packets, and I don't know if anybody uses those up here. Tack them to the tree, depends on the size of the tree. You could tack 2 of them if it's big enough. They seem to work better in lodgepole than ponderosa. I've seen places where they work great, up in Crystal Lakes, higher elevation, a lot of lodgepole up there. They got hit pretty hard. I saw properties that it worked great. I saw properties, and I think it was Red Feather Heights up the road on Ponderosa, they lost 50%. So, and I don't know how well you did. And the study said lodgepole works better, and also the study said when the population's high, they don't work quite as well when the population's low. They do okay. Then there was Zips beetle. I saw this probably the same day, and fortunately the color didn't come out all that well, but you can see the whole tree is fading, like the pine beetle tree. And I pulled over and I went, that looks like another pine beetle tree. I got out and walked over to it, and it was an Ips attack. Normally, and again, the Ips will attack the top of the tree, but because of all the pine beetle, all the cutting, all the slash, and unfortunately when they did the fire mitigation grant up here, they weren't very timely at getting the slash out, which caused a problem in itself. Always do the fire mitigation, but unfortunately the slash has to be taken care of. This tree was fading at one time, and it was close to right now, but it's going to get better. It really will. That's the Ips beetle, about half the size of the pine beetle. Pine beetle is nice, rounded, black. This is sort of squished up there, and the back end sort of caved in, and that's how you can tell an Ips beetle. And it has these little spines off the back. There's about 14 in the state of different species of Ips in the state, though that paper might mention, I think maybe 11, depends on what book you read. There are some Ips beetle that will go after pinyon pine only, some Ips beetle will go after spruce only, some will go just a specific tree. There's 5 or 6, probably maybe 7 that go after lodgepole ponderosa. There's a lot of Ips out there. Usually, if I go out and look at somebody's wood pile, I will find Ips in it, especially fresh firewood stacked. I will find Ips in it. Don't put your firewood between trees, because they'll come to these nice cut logs. When they're done there, they're just going to go to these nice big trees. And a guy up in Estes Park, he did that, and 2 20-inch ponderosas, boom, they both got it. And he thought it was pine beetle. I walked up there and went, sorry. And he just, and he worked so hard at it. He really did. The hard thing about this, 3 to 5 generations a year. I've seen them start to fly in March when it warms up, and I've seen them fly as late as, I haven't seen them in November, but I've seen them in late October, the last generation. That makes it difficult. If you wanted to spray, you would use the same chemicals, and again, this is when I wouldn't spray for, unless there might be a situation around a particular house, maybe some construction or new construction, the foundation damaged roots for that tree, though that tree shouldn't be there because of fire mitigation. But if you left the tree and damaged the root system, or you put in a water line or the leach field and you damaged the root system, you may want to have that tree sprayed, especially if you do it in the summertime. Have it sprayed almost that day or the day after, because they will sense a wounded tree and they will go there. So there's a reason why you would spray, but if you wanted to spray early season, you really can't spray in March up here because there's snow on the ground. You can't spray when there's snow on the ground. It gets into the groundwater. That's against the rules. That's against the law. If you see a sprayer doing that, call the Department of Ag. Report them. And again, do the fire mitigation.
if you're going to attract a few ips. And a lot of times those ips would just hit the top of the tree. It might kill the top of the tree, then they just fly somewhere else. They generally don't kill trees. If the tree is fading, it's done. Yeah, it needs to be green. Chlorophyll, that sort of stuff. There'll be a little bitty pitch tube. A lot of times you will not see pitch tubes with ips. I just happened to look at that tree that day. That beetle was going into that tree. A lot of times it's such a small pitch tube. Rain, wind is just going to knock those off, and you're not really going to see it. The ips was coming out and depositing the frass because ips are better housekeepers. But he was crawling in and out. But little bitty, and when you see the logs laying on the wood pile, a lot of times you might see the pitch tubes or the frass just sitting on the top of the trunk because it's a flat surface. These are the galleries of the Ips beetle. You see where it's at. It's clean. This is the larvae feeding, and they can't do much about it. But the initial gallery, you have a male, 3-4 females. Females go their separate ways when they're done, and then they lay their eggs, and that's why there's so many ips in there. And if they repeatedly attack a tree, then again, it's going to grow the tree. There is also blue stain associated with that, but you got to know the difference between the galleries and the damage. And then we talked about treatment would be the same chemicals, but sanitation is a key. Sanitation truly is the key with this one. If you're going to cut down the tree, and again, get your slash to the slash pile. Those Ips beetles are probably all over that, but they're so happy in there because there's so much wood. So it's fine. You just don't want to, if you have a meadow, take the logs out, let them dry out in the meadow. And once the bark starts to pop and separate, it's not a good living environment. They can't reproduce. And then you can cut it up and move the firewood closer to your house. It depends on what your property is and how you plan on treating the slash piles. If the slash pile was away from all your other trees, they're fine. If they're piled underneath a group of trees, if your slash pile's underneath a group of trees, come winter, you may not want to even burn that pile because it's under a group of trees. Even though I burn slash piles under trees when it's 20 below, you stay nice and warm and you don't damage the tree. But if the tree's not pruned up, you can damage that tree. So you really don't want to pile slash underneath a tree. The slash pile, if you have a meadow, if you want to put it out there, it's wildlife cover. And it's okay, but not underneath your trees. The cut wood, the fresh cut wood, the Ips will go to. If the wood's been there for 8-9 months, when it's starting to dry out, they're not going to be there. They've already done a generation or two and they're going. But they start to dry out, you get that separation in the bark, and they just leave. Sanitation is the key with this guy. Chipping's okay. The chips are going to be small enough, you're going to grind up most of the beetles anyhow. There might be some ipslet. Depends on where they're taking the chips to. Chips are fine. You don't want your chips to get very deep at all. Some people say 3 inches is okay, but that's not true. You really only want a couple inches at the most, because actually if you get too much, you're going to end up with a weed problem, and Casey's going to be back. But the chips actually will dry out pretty quickly. Any beetles, they need that bark. The bark would interface to survive. Now here in town, we're talking about MRI sport. It's a different thing, but we're not. And their exit holes are pinhead size. Smaller beetle, smaller holes. And you'll see those on, the firewood piles or whatever. But yeah, they're pretty small. You don't want to mistake those for lenticels. Lenticels are natural. It's for air and gas exchange. It's a natural thing. These are nice, perfectly round holes. So the beetles are gone, but there may be a second generation in there. So that's the Ips beetle. Dwarf mistletoe, drove around here. There are some areas you don't see dwarf mistletoe. You see other areas down that direction, dwarf mistletoe all over the place. Dwarf mistletoe pretty much is slow death of a tree. It's a leafless parasitic plant. Takes about 6 to 8 years to mature, to shoot out the seeds. Seeds go out about 60 miles an hour, but they're so small, they don't go far. In a heavily wooded area, the advancement is 6 to 18 inches a year. So it's pretty slow in a heavily wooded area. Where it's not as wooded, it will be further, because actually what's up here just sort of rains down on something down here. A lot of times I've seen little trees this size just hammered with dwarf mistletoe. But it's pretty much slow death, but actually that part of the branch is going to start to swell. Even before a lot of times the plant itself is visible, you're going to see a swelling on a branch. You start to think something's going to come out of there. So those are our first signs. A sign that we look for, witch's broom. It's just a physiological reaction to that plant. Not all witch's broom are related to dwarf mistletoe. Not really sure what's going on up there, but there could be all sorts of things. But dwarf mistletoe, if we see witch's broom, we start looking for the plant. It looks like a ball. It's just really dense. This is damage from dwarf mistletoe. It does kill the tree, and it does take some time. Management of dwarf mistletoe, we rank light, moderate, heavy. We divide the crown into thirds. If there is no mistletoe in that section of the crown, it gets a 0. If 50% of the branches are infested, it gets a 1, or more than 50, it gets a 2. You add this together, you get light, heavy, and moderate. If you're going to do management, heavy trees go first. They'll go first. And I would almost say moderate, 4, 5 you might take out also. Because it takes a long time to kill these trees, you have time to plant underneath and do some management. You don't want to take down all your trees because you want something out there. So you take the heavier stuff out first. The lighter stuff, if you can prune that branch out, do it. As soon as you prune that branch out, it loses the mistletoe itself loses the nutrients in the water. They die pretty much immediately. So you just prune it off, go to the slash pile. How fast it will kill a heavily infested 4 to 9 inch tree, 7 years, 50% of the trees will be dead. A lightly infested thing overnight, seriously, 60 years. Longer than we're going to be around. But as long as that's there, it's going to rain seeds down onto the lower plants. So if you're doing management, you might consider it, but if it's lightly infested, you still want something. There is a chemical, Florel. It's used in the nursery or orchard industry. It regulates fruit, and they do spray it for pine beetle or for dwarf mistletoe. It keeps it from going to seed, but it has to be retreated, in 2 to 3 years in a heavily infested area. Pine beetle, you spray the wall of the tree, you've got to spray the whole crown. It's not all, it really doesn't cause a problem with the wildlife, but you want to do that every 2 to 3 years, spray the whole crown. I've heard of some people using it. I'm sure it works. It's Florel. What you could plant if you are in a ponderosa forest, those other species of trees can be planted underneath. They're not affected by the mistletoe from ponderosa. So you can underplant, have a forest coming up as that one dies. So there's a management thing you can do. It's long term, but then again, you got time. This tree, you can see all the dwarf mistletoe in there. Once you see this stuff, you can always recognize it. But a lot of times, the first person, you have to go out and just point at it. It's right there. I really ought to take my laser with me then. It's in this row of trees. This is going to get back to fire mitigation. But these trees right along the road, if they got big, we don't really want trees like that along the road. And the fire will get to these trees. The firefighters do not want to go down a burning road. And if they're that close, you don't want them falling on the road and being a pain in the wintertime and the windy time. So it'd be a good, take these trees out. To make the proper cut on a conifer, you're almost having to go all the way back to the bowl of the tree. To the bowl of the tree, the trunk. If you make a cut in the middle of a branch, it actually, in tree business, that's a candy stick. A pine needle scale, see all that white stuff? Pine needle scale on pines, firs, and spruce, same critter. And again, we saw an increase in this after everybody did all the spraying for pine beetle. Unfortunately, we don't kill pine beetle with a spray. We kill other insects. The beneficial insects there's some wasps who will go after the little larvae. Ladybug beetles will go after the larvae. The ladybug beetles pretty much hatch pretty much at the same time these guys. I've seen it heavily in Estes Park. We've seen it heavily in Aspen and Vale, where everybody sprays all their trees, and they spray for 15 years after pine beetles disappeared, and it's just like, come on, give me a break. I do believe it's going to right itself. There are treatments, and again, we can use those same chemicals, but we don't want to do that because we're not really helping the situation unless it's that prize tree in your front yard. But if you use those chemicals, about May is when you want to treat. Horticultural oils, you want to spray before May or right up to May, because actually the crawlers start moving around the middle of May. Once they're underneath the white waxy stuff, you can't really get to them. Insecticide, of course, you got to spray horticultural oils above 50 degrees temperature. And if you're spraying spruce trees, may actually cause some discoloration of that spruce tree. It's short term, don't freak if you think you're going to have to do it. Insecticidal soaps, you have to make contact with the crawler, and again, middle May, just about middle of June, you got these things crawling around, and you might have to do it twice, but insecticidal soaps are pretty gentle. So you have some options, and again, if we let the beneficial insects build up again, and a lot of times bad winters will just knock this stuff back really bad. If you see it, don't necessarily freak. Larger trees with this on it, you might have some burn-ins of a needle, or maybe a little bit of a branch. Smaller trees, it can kill it if it's heavily infested enough, because actually they're sapsuckers. If that's the only thing you have out there regenerating, you might want to hit it with some horticultural oil or something like that. I would stay away from the other stuff if we can. I mean, there's a great benefit to the insecticides, but if we can use something safer, do it. This is what a ponderosa forest would look like. Actually, the old adage is a cowboy should be able to ride through the ponderosa forest with his hat on and not knock it off. You can do that on this property. They did a great job on this property. If you got up to the house, it's just like, the siding's all wrong. They have plants right next to it, and that's not a good thing. It would not ever get a CO today, but it's been there for such a long time. But they did a great job out in the meadow. Actually, if a fire comes running through there, it will set down in the grass, go slower. It may just burn the grass. Ponderosa is somewhat fire resistant once it gets to the crown. If it just runs through the grass, it just clears out all this stuff underneath, and that's the way these forests are supposed to grow. I don't want to tell anybody to go start a fire in your yard, because that's not going to be good. But they do it all over the place. They do it up around Red Feather and quite a few places the Forest Service does. And every once in a while they do get a little crowning. For the most part, those areas that they've done and they come back and burn afterward, they're great. And again, this is figure out your average diameter, add 7 to it. That's pretty much your spacing. Actually, there's information over there about defensible space around a house. That pretty much is what the state said. Unfortunately, you got to listen to what your insurance company says, because they're becoming really tough, especially up in a lodgepole forest. And I've known people up in Estes Park or out on Highway 7. It's just like they got to go out 100 feet from their house with not a tree in sight. And there are places up in Red Feather I got people calling. And if you know the old part of Red Feather, little tiny lots. And you have a little tiny cabin, and they're 20 feet away, and you can't do that defensible space, even the 15 to 30 feet, because you're in the neighbor's house. So I like junipers. I really do. I wouldn't take it out if it's that far away, and if it's ladder fuel, yeah, maybe so. But it depends on how, even if you had a nice spacing, if you had a juniper growing underneath there, junipers actually, they'll get 20 feet anyhow. Maybe more, which will put it up into the ground. So maybe that tree I might. But if it's somewhere out there, they do burn hot, they do burn fast. So if it's out by itself, let it be.